Good evening, everyone. Today is the start of one of our information sessions. Today, we're talking about adolescence and mental health, what every parent and guardian should know. Um, it's not going to be too long, but we're just going to give you some basic facts, some things to look out for, some warning signs, and we will upload to each one of our platforms where you can go to get support and help and even resources that will help you deal with any of the problems that maybe you might have with any of the young people in your life. Um, it's important to recognize that the leading cause of death between ages 10 and 24 is suicide, which is very, 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 very disturbing. Um, it highlights a lot of what our young people are going through and how so many of them are falling between the cracks. Um, Another statistic that you may want to know is that, let me make sure I get this correct. I believe, okay, it says that depression is the single largest risk factor to suicide, with 90 to 98% of all dying by suicide having a diagnosable mental illness, and it's most commonly depression. Um, those are very, very serious implications for us. Often, depression and mental health has a stigma, and so about 80% of people who suffer with mental health issues, or depression, do not receive the help that they need because of this stigma. And our work is just beginning because we have to do something about figuring out how um, to do away with this stigma because people are they're not living their best life and children are growing up uh, the effects of not being able to get help with depression for long periods of time actually changes the brain chemistry over a period of time. And so, what will happen is, as adolescents, as young people, they tend to grow up and then have issues, relationship issues. And when we say relationship, we're not necessarily talking about romantic relationships. Remember, relationships are all types of relationships: familial relationships, work relationships. Um, they are more susceptible to substance abuse um, because then, of course, you're trying to escape the very things that are really having a traumatic effect on your life and what you see. Um, some of the things as parents and guardians and as friends that we should look for um, in youth and young people and even young adults. Some of the symptoms are the same. Maybe loss of appetite, maybe a gain of appetite. Some people engage in emotional eating. Um, Also, loss of sleep or too much sleep. I suffer from mental health issues, and what used to happen to me is I used to sleep a lot, just sleep my whole life away. Um, I'm also somebody who had issues with anger, so I tended to be very aggressive. So you might see some aggressive aggression in some people. Some people might not have aggression. Some people might sink into the background. Most notably, you might hear negative talk that speaks about the lack of self worth, very negative tone. Um, you might experience people who have lost any interest in how they look or what they look like. Sometimes people um, won't get up and shower, or even if they are people who have it together and they leave the house and they look like everything is great, it's all good, but they're still suffering when they come home. They're suffering inside. They're not speaking, but there are usually some signs. For young people, might be acting out in school, might be the grades dropping, it might be a change of friends, substance abuse, as we've also talked about, issues with relationships with other people, increased appetite, loss of interest in activities, maybe even reckless behavior. I engaged as a teenager in very, very reckless behavior. I did things that only by the grace of God am I still here living and breathing. Um, And a lot of that I'm sure would probably be connected to some of my issues as a young person with mental health issues. 67% of students tell a friend that they are feeling suicidal. So this is even for young people. If your friend tells you, uh, don't be afraid to get support and help for them. That's a cry out for help. Do not worry about. I know it's kind of like this thing, like you're telling on your friend, um, but if they're your friend and you want them to be around for a while, think of it in terms of wanting them to get help and being here. There are a lot of different websites that we will give you links to that you will be able to look at and really be able to go to and sign up for. They have a lot of like toolkits in terms of dealing with depression and mental health with young people and with adults as well. Um, One of the other things that young people deal with is bullying. Now, I was bullied as a kid. I don't know. It seems a little different now. I experienced being bullied for quite some time. It was very, very difficult. It was very, very hard. I didn't fit in very well. So that might have been also an issue. I was like a kid. I was very, very different. It was awkward. One in two youth has experienced some sort of bullying. Um, so that also plays a role too in what goes on. We have some other things that you can think about and talk about with your family. Maybe doing it together. Meditative and calming exercises. Um, Especially because 50% of us will experience some mental health condition in our lifetime. One in five people have experienced some mental health issue. Um, I've engaged with young people who have experienced anxiety, and they find that, especially with smartphones, the more they're on smartphones, the higher the percentages of anxiety and depression. Anxiety is normal. It's nothing abnormal about anxiety. Um, we get anxious, job interviews, new tests, first days of school. Um, so parents, be aware that anxiety is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a normal fight or flight response. What becomes an issue is when anxiety starts to shape how you live your everyday life. However, like anxiety disorders, which can cause um, a dramatic effect on how you live everyday life, where you become stressful or terrified or frightened to do certain things. Um, those things. Between 50 and 20% of teens have a depressive episode. Um, that doesn't seem like a lot, but it is. You have to be very, very careful about depression and mental health issues because they can look like other things. They can look like, oh, my kid is just being lazy, or oh, he's just experiencing mood swings. And that's not really the case. They could be depressed. So, be very, very careful in terms of, you know, watching out for these signs. Looking out for warning signs is the number one thing. Looking out for, if your kids are struggling, uh, being aware of the relationships that they have with their friends, or if they're in, other relationships. I mean, obviously, if you have a smaller child, that won't be the case. It's much more difficult, I think, when you have smaller children, to probably be able to really, really figure out whether or not they are at the place where they want to commit suicide. But keeping an open dialogue with your children, and always letting them know that they can come to you and speak to you, setting aside time specifically to talk with children, I think is an asset. So I think that's something that you have to look into. Um, Effective treatments. Sometimes they suggest medication, but before you even get to medication, talk therapy. Like I was just saying, talk to your kids. Set aside a time. Let them know that they have priority with you. Um, there's some lifestyle changes that need to happen. A lot of times it's really, really difficult, but healthy diet, exercise, um, sleep is very, very important. Making sure that our children sleep at a proper time, so that the body can recuperate and heal and rest, so that the next day, those things have a very, very effective way of dealing with your inner emotions and so on and so forth. And be aware, untreated depression, like I said, can cause difficulties. So we want to be very, very aware of destigmatizing mental health, especially for our young people, because we want them to understand that there's nothing wrong with you. You are made perfectly, you are imperfectly perfect, and that you are made in the image of everything that is good. And stigmas is a work that we all have to do. Um, like I said, I wasn't going to keep everybody very, very long, but these are certain things that I think that parents and guardians should be on the lookout for. And there is hope. There is hope. I am a living testimony to that. That there is hope. I still have my days, um, but I've created my own safety plan in terms of dealing with the days that I have that I battle with mental health. And as parents and guardians and as family members, create a safety plan. And like I said, we will have some links that you'll be able to go to and be able to investigate how to do that. But I think we've started you guys off on a very, very good step on how to do that. So once again, the number one thing I think is most important is that the young people always feel like they have somebody that's in their corner. It's the number one thing. They have somebody that's in their corner and somebody they can speak to. So thank you once again. Tomorrow we'll be doing mood versus food. Well, mood equals food. Mental supreme. We'll be talking about the effects of food and mental health, and how healthy eating can actually affect your mood and help you live a better lifestyle. So thank you once again for joining us, and we will see you the rest of the week. We got great stuff planned for you. Good night.